happen in Europe that are quickly copied in the States and heavily promoted in Silicon Valley. So being in Silicon Valley gives you access to this incredible hype machine. Now the good news is that lately London is becoming a rival, a small rival, but it's becoming a rival to and the London tech scene is becoming a rival to the Silicon Valley hype machine, and more things are happening in London, and we have access to London. The Germans have access to London, the French have access to London, the Finnish have access to London, and we are realizing that if we hype our ways through London in some way, we also get heard. There's TechCrunch in London, there's my butcher who does all these events, and there's other people, and there are ways to get yourself into the same media that takes place in Silicon Valley. It is sad that we need to read ourselves through Silicon Valley to believe in ourselves, right? That's kind of like a sad paradox, but it is remarkable that we have the largest GDP in the world, right? And it's remarkable that when you really study what happens at Google, you see that, for example, Google actually makes more money in Europe than it makes in USA, right? So you say, well, it turns out that as poorly as we do, or for example, like a country like the United Kingdom, just the United Kingdom alone is over 15% of the earnings of Google. So not only do we need to hype ourselves through USA, sometimes we need to buy what we buy through USA, right? But we have the largest market in the world right here in Europe. The GDP of Europe, and it also depends what you call Europe, the European Union of Europe or whatever, but it's something like 15 trillion to 17 trillion. We are slightly ahead of USA in terms of GDP. So what happens is a lot of the companies in the States, they start in the States and then they come to Europe. There's some people who specialize in, ahead of that movement, like my friends, the Samwer brothers, ahead of that movement, they make clones of the American companies, which then they sell back to the American companies. They have built in a profitable business doing that, and that's fantastic. But my personal preference is for original, creative startups, and I think we can do a lot of that. I think copycatting is interesting, could be profitable, but not particularly interesting to me, okay? To me, when I invest in companies, there has to be some kind of originality or angle that makes them stand out. And I think there's a lot of originality in Europe. I just think that we have a hard time putting it together, and especially we have a hard time in some way disseminating this idea in a global environment, okay? And we partly have a hard time because in Europe we have a ridiculous liking for our own little culture. Whatever little culture we have, and it is little, okay, we somehow love it, right? And so we are Catalan and we love Catalonia, and or we love whatever, we're Italian and we love things Italian, or we're Spanish and we love things Spanish. And when you're building a global company, you kind of have to forget about all that. You know, you're not going to build a global company loving things Italian, okay? There has to be, what you have to build is a global company. You have to build a global company loving the common denominator of humanity. You have to find the common denominator of humanity. You have to find the minimum common denominator of humanity. That is the only way you will build a global company. Now, you could say that's why the interfaces of Silicon Valley companies, many people say, well, they're not so nice, they're boring, like Google. It's a box, always a box with a little doodle or something that they do every day to make it interesting. Yeah, but that's the minimum common denominator of humanity, okay? The idea is you're not going to build a company making it super whatever culture you care to love, okay? The more Finnish you make it, the more Swedish you make it, the more British you make it, then it is hard. And especially on the internet, that people will really appreciate what you do. So for example, in the case of Phone, the company I run now, which has become the largest Wi-Fi network in the world, and we have around 4 million hotspots, when companies like Deutsche Telekom have like 50,000, okay? We become the largest Wi-Fi network in the world with a simple tagline, which is you share a little Wi-Fi at home and you roam the world for free. We found the commonality that the whole world had with this concept of Wi-Fi. We also found in Wi-Fi the only frequency that is truly global. Because not even 3G is global, not even, I mean, you think about Verizon, or you get a Verizon phone, but it doesn't work in Europe, or you get a T-Mobile phone and it doesn't work in Europe, or you get not even 3G is global, but Wi-Fi is global. Okay, so you can build companies outside of Silicon Valley, but they better be the common denominator of humanity. Okay, they cannot be something that either because of the technology, like the frequency, or either because of the culture, is a very local thing. Okay, it is true that there is a market for very local things, like you could say Almodovar is a Spanish brand that somehow people like in many places. They like Almodovar's movie, and he does a super Spanish thing, and somehow is el jamón de bellota of the movies, right? But that is not what you should be aiming for. I mean, yes, you can take a local concept and somehow make it pretty global. And some of these local concepts have made it global. I don't know, like sushi or pizza, or I can think of some very Italian things, very Japanese things that have become global. But it is rare, and especially in technology, that you will convince the whole world to dance whatever little thing you came up with that you think it's so great, but it's just so local, right? So in general, you have to. Now concretely, even though I think there's life outside of Silicon Valley, there are difficulties outside of Silicon Valley, okay? And I moved away from the States, came to Europe after I sold a startup in the mid-90s, because I thought the best thing you could do is make your money in America, but spend it in Europe, right? I thought that Europe was a great place to be when you left work, right? Or when you went on vacation, right? And I found that actually Europe was a great place to be to start a business, and Spain in particular, because in Spain, being successful, and being successful very quickly, is a dirty job, okay? I know it's hard to explain, but when I built, let's say, Ya.com, we invested 35 million euros, we sold it a year and a half later for 550 million euros. They were trashing me here, okay? They were calling it pelotazo, which somehow means making a lot of money quickly, which somehow is bad. Okay? So there is a cultural issue about being an entrepreneur in Spain. Now, Spain has incredible entrepreneurs, like Amancio Ortega, right? Amancio Ortega is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. I had the pleasure to go meet with him and teach him how to use the internet. And Amancio Ortega should be a national hero, except that he lives in hiding, right? And everybody only knows this one picture of him where he's like that, looking like a criminal. And you say, well, why? Why does Europe hide a hero like Amancio Ortega, right? Why does a person who's given so many jobs to so many people, has created a global brand, or Antique, right? The guy who did Mango. Why do people who do these things, or why, by the way, many people ask me, why do I expose myself so much, you know, with all the who knows what that there is, the animosity that there is towards doing well. So there's a concept that a lot of people hear and are particularly ambitious because they think, oh, if I make a lot of money, I have to deal with all this shit of being successful, right? And I have to put up with all I have to go into hiding like Amancio Ortega, okay? I have my 20 billion, but I have to hide somewhere and show a picture, you know, that I'm like a criminal. And that is wrong, you know, that is wrong. And until we don't make Amancio Ortega, we should have like La Castellana, y ¿por qué Ortega y Gasset? And then Amancio Ortega, another street, okay, or whatever. I don't know what we should do. For the job creators of Europe to somehow get a better platform. That there should be more inspiration to a lot of people who are trying to think, what am I going to do with my life? Should I get a job at the ayuntamiento or should I become an entrepreneur? Okay, so the culture is bad. Having said this, it is great if you don't give a damn about these things. Like I don't give a damn about these things. So if you come to a country and you say, well, I don't care, okay, I know I'm not humble, and I'm proud of my success, and if you come with different values, and many Spaniards have them, and they do incredibly well, because there is also a lack of competition in Spain and everywhere in Europe. There is a lack of competition, so it is tremendous to be an entrepreneur if you're willing to put up with it, if you're willing to put up with the consequences of success. If you're willing to look at people straight in the face and you say, yes, I would like to be very successful, which it seems to be somehow embarrassing when you say it in Spanish. If you say it in English, it sounds right. I want to be very successful. I'm ambitious. You say it in Spanish. Yo quiero ser muy exitoso. Soy ambicioso. You look like a freak. So it is important to understand that you are outside this fear and that you yourself want to, and if you do that, then it is good to be here and it is good to be outside of Silicon Valley because you help a lot of people, you create jobs. There's so many unemployed youth all over Europe and especially here, okay? And you're helping regardless of what people may say. And people say, no, but you pay, the salary is mileuristas, the salary is 1,000 euros. Why? Because there's not enough of us. If there were a lot of entrepreneurs fighting for those employees, their salaries would not be 1,000 euros. Okay? It is so clear that what people need here is more entrepreneurs. But they don't want to say it. They don't want to admit it. They ask the government, what's the solution? What does the government know? What does Zapatero know about creating a single job? Okay? I mean, I think the guy is clueless, absolutely clueless. Okay? But the people who would want Zapatero to create jobs are clueless too. Because he's absolutely unable to understand anything that most people in this room understand. Okay? And I tell you, I've been with him. Okay? So it is, he looks like you know. Rajoy is the same. It's hopeless, okay? Hopeless. The last people who understood something in Spain were Felipe González and Aznar, who either of them would be better than Rajoy and Zapatero in government, even randomly and even flipping a coin. I would take them. Okay? So now the issue is, what is wrong in Europe? Well, in Europe there's a concept of the entrepreneur. The problem of there's a lack of understanding of what failure is, and there's a tremendous burden on the entrepreneur. And if you fail in Europe, it is very difficult to declare personal bankruptcy, clean slate, and start again. In fact, the concept of personal bankruptcy doesn't exist really. I know of people who tried startups and failed in Spain, and they owe their money forever to Social Security, to whatever. So you have to be very careful about that. And when you hire people in Spain and you pay people in Spain and you pay people anywhere in Europe actually, you should just make provisions. The way I do it is I think about it. What if my company closed tomorrow? What if my company closed tomorrow? Even when the company is doing well, I always think, what if the company closed tomorrow? Do I have enough money to pay indemnizaciones to everyone else, severance pay to everyone else, right? So you have to understand that the thinking of people in Europe towards people like us is that we owe them even if we fail, okay? Which is a difficult concept to live with because you say, hey, I tried hard, I tried to create a job, I tried to do well, I tried to make money, I tried to grow, but I failed. I didn't do anything illegal, I just failed. And people say, well, you still owe me la indemnización, right? So it's almost, so actually it should be accounted for. Having said this, the salaries here and the salaries for engineers here and technical people here are probably 70% lower than in Silicon Valley, okay? Even with the euro at 1.42 last time I checked, okay? So the salaries here are very low compared to Silicon Valley. And there's another advantage in Europe, which is people don't want to move, okay? And you would say, well, how is that an advantage? Well, it is an advantage because once you establish a company that does very well in Spain, like Phone is doing very well, and you pay a little more than the competition, and you provide a happy environment, and you give stock options, people who work for you give such a value to being in Spain, to being in Madrid, to being, that somebody in Silicon Valley has to do I don't know what to get them. The people are very loyal, they're very, and people here have values which at work are sometimes problematic, but outside of work there's certainly better values than in Silicon Valley, right? And so that is also very, very important. Such values as loyalty, friendship, the people who work in the companies that I built, they see companies like Jastel like an extension of the family. I still see parties. There are 2 parties of the people who used to work in Jastel 10 years ago. It's like a very special thing, the startup. Everybody goes through the startup and is very happy and is very grateful. And then one of the wonderful things of working in Europe in general is that we couldn't care less, or we really don't think a lot about lawyers, okay? That we don't have to worry that we're going to get sued for the weirdest reasons. When I worked in America, it was just incredible, the things that can happen. I have friends in America who have built companies, sold them for $500 million, and then somebody says, you saw me one day, you owe me $50 million, or that crazy thing of The Social Network, the movie. I mean, if Zuckerberg had been here doing Facebook, the Winklevoss, I don't know what, twins, would be like so non-existent, right? Who would give a damn about the Winklevoss whatever, you know? It's like, in America, people can sue for the weirdest shit. That's something that we don't have here. And that's good, okay? Because we live in peace. We don't have to worry. What's bad, we know, okay? In America, you have this thing that you don't know what may happen to you. And I'm sure that Mark Zuckerberg must be like, who's going to come now and say they started Facebook? Because every day there's somebody else who said they started Facebook. Which of course, if Facebook had failed like that poorly, nobody would have even given him a, sent him a Facebook message. So the legal environment is much better in Europe, much better, and the medical is something insane in America. It's like, I would say when in America I had to pay $1,000 per employee, $800 per employee of medical costs. Right? I mean, the cost of, because people say, oh, the social charges are higher in Europe. Yeah, but when you count such things as the medical expenses, they aren't, okay? And here instead, we offer private medical insurance to everybody at phone, and people didn't even think it was, people like the health system they have here. It's like people don't, and if you want to offer private insurance, it costs like 60 euros a month, not like $800 a month, right? So medical is better here. Legal is better here. Legal costs, never mind this thing that you may get sued, just the cost of seeing lawyers or doing anything. When I was taking companies public in America, take a company public, $1 million legal fee. Anything you do, you raise some money. The money you pay to lawyers in America is just insane. You know, you say, but who are these people? And they are the people who run the country, okay? They make the laws. The lawyers are in America what the military used to be when I was growing up in Argentina, you know? And so, it is, I'm exaggerating. But they are rapacious, okay, rapacious. Okay, so the work atmosphere is better, the legal system is better, the medical system is better, okay? The responsibility you can kind of deal with by leaving some money aside in case you don't do well. The hiring situation is better. People are grateful when you give them a job. And there's over 30% youth unemployment here. Although the youth unemployment and all these unemployment figures are very kind of not true, because when you study exactly who's unemployed in Spain, it is really mostly people who didn't finish high school. And when you study among the people who are educated and well prepared, there's not a lot of unemployment here. Okay, so it's, of course, we're sorry for everyone who didn't finish high school, but we're not talking about here, we are not going to do a startup and hire a lot of people who didn't finish high school, right? Than Silicon Valley, where Zynga, Facebook, Google, you know, it's like, if you're a startup, they will steal your engineers the next day. Okay, you will lose your engineers. So that's also something very important. And then the taxation system, everybody thinks Europe has very high taxes. That is not true for entrepreneurs, okay? It is not true. In America, if you live in New York City, where I used to live, taxes are almost 50%, okay? New York City is socialist, okay, if you haven't found out. Half of what you earn goes to everyone else, the homeless and whatever, so, or nuclear weapons. So it is a lot goes to nuclear weapons, so, or to weapons, like the US spends half of what the whole world spends in the military. So it is, a lot of your taxes go to the military, some go to social services, but bottom line is you pay you pay federal tax, you pay New York State tax, then you pay New York City tax, and when all is said and done, they're taking away half of your money, okay? In Spain, you pay 40% max, not 48. By the way, if you live in the state of Florida, you pay less because then you don't pay state tax, whatever. It's not always the same, but taxation is not as bad as people think in Europe. And at least in Europe, you get a good medical system, you get a good, I mean, in Europe, you don't have to do all this and then pay on top of that for most of everything you want to do in life. And then the corporate taxes are much lower in Europe. Have you been reading about this? One of the theories about why Microsoft paid $8.5 billion for Skype. One of the theories, I mean, I think Skype is a wonderful company, and actually Skype is an investor in fund, so now Microsoft is an investor in fund. My new partner is Microsoft. In fact, I now have Google and Microsoft as my partner. It's probably the only company in the world. But having said all this, I read an article today that really shocked me, that it said that basically the fact that Skype was a Luxembourg corporation made it much cheaper to buy for Microsoft than if it had been an American corporation, because corporate taxes are much higher. So the American companies who make so much money in Europe, they leave it in Europe. They're all waiting for you guys to make a company because they want to buy it with the money they have in Europe. So the money is here in Europe, because when it goes to America, it has to pay 35% tax. Okay? You probably didn't know this, but Google is an Irish corporation. Okay? Google is an Irish corporation. Okay? So we think of going there, but they think of coming here. You know, we should think about it, right? So it's very interesting that from a taxation point of view, Europe is better. And it's better because it does better with the taxes. It uses the tax money more wisely, even though, of course, we have too many funcionarios, whatever. But at least we don't have, you know, we don't have to spend half of what the world spends in the military. And on top of that, we don't waste our money. If you look at it in America, for example, 12% of GDP they spend on medicine, and then they die much sooner than we die here in Europe. Say, and we spend like 5% of GDP. So somehow we're doing well. You know? We spend less and people live longer. Although I also read that the Spaniards are the people who live the longest, but the sickest people at work. That is, you know, it's true. Like at work, the Spaniards are the sickest. The one with the most sick days given by Spanish doctors. But then they live the longest, you know. Maybe it's because they work less. Maybe that actually makes you live longer. You know, maybe we're idiots, all of us who want to work so hard. Okay, so now let's say what I think would be a balanced solution. Okay, a balanced solution, and I thought about this. You see, when I started Phone and Google invested in Phone, Sergey Brin, the founder of Google, said to me, okay, we're investing with you, but when are you moving to Silicon Valley, right? And I said, we're not moving to Silicon Valley. And he says, well, name one successful global startup that ever started out of Spain. I said, phone, you know. And we stayed here, right? You need that arrogance, I'm telling you. It's like, and so, of course, we weren't successful then, and we're moderately successful now. I hope we'll be much more. But what I'm trying to say is that there is a compromise, and you may want to think about this. Once you're very advanced, not at the beginning, there are companies who move their CEO and their business development to Silicon Valley, but leave everything else in Europe. And that may be a compromise that is not bad. Kind of leave the factory, the engineers, they create, leave a lot of things in Europe. But be part of the hype machine, be part of the, you know, so once you're big enough, but big enough for the CEO not to have to be in the factory all the time, right? Once you are big enough that you have a situation in Europe, you may want to move to Silicon Valley because that's where the action is, the brainstorming and so on. But we looked at the cost of moving the whole company to Silicon Valley, and it was like insane. Okay, our cost. Well, first of all, the Spanish employees many didn't want to move. Some may want to move. So we have tremendous know-how. Our employees are amazing. They're like really, they're world class. I mean, you can find the best people in the world here in Spain. I'm not saying that the whole employee pool on the average is the best employee pool in the world. But I'm saying that if you look hard and well, you can find world-class people here in Spain. And you can find world-class people even in Estonia, which is what Skype did, okay? So you can find world-class people almost everywhere in Europe if you look hard enough. In fact, we had an audit done by a top Silicon Valley entrepreneur who came to study at my request. I said, look, come and interview the people I have here in Spain, some of which are Spaniards, some of which are from other countries. Tell me, do I have a world-class company here? Because I had this fear that I wasn't running a world-class company. He came, he did an audit, he interviewed all my managers, and he told me that we had a world-class company here in Madrid, okay? Last remarks, what about Asia? Okay, what about Latin America? What about the rest of the world? Africa, the Middle East. Silicon Valley is not all of the United States. It's Silicon Valley. In many other places in the States, things are clearly worse than they would be anywhere in Europe, okay? But what about China? Or what about a company called Naspers, which I don't know if you heard about, that they threw their South African media group, they throw some money in China because they understanding that the old media newspaper industry is declining, and they turned something like 30 million into 14 billion by investing in Tencent in China, okay? And now they just bought companies of my friends in Argentina, they bought OLX, they bought Dinero Mailing, which I had invested. There's companies that are like, making the point of making all the money outside of the United States. South African company invest in China, invest in Latin America, invest in Russia, invest in everywhere outside of the United States, generally outside of the European Union too. In proportion, we are shrinking in Europe and America in proportion of the representation of the world, okay? The rest of the world, I mean, I think this is the decade, this decade, where we're now, in which the poor people are saving the asses of the rich people. The rich people are borrowing and the poor people are funding. The Chinese are funding us. The cash is being generated in poor countries, and we went from a world in which the rich finance the poor to a world in which the poor are financing the rich. And the rich are getting poorer as a result, and the poor are getting richer as a result. Okay? Because the poor got tired of the IMF and all this. You know that in America this thing, they say, how would you like to pay, credit or debit? Well, debit means that you have money. Credit means that you owe money. And somehow in America everybody thinks credit is better than debit. Like the people who have money are poor. The people who can borrow a lot of money, those are the people who have credit, right? Well, right now, USA has a credit card, and China has a debit card, okay? And I think, in general, it is also very interesting for you, even though some of you may not be from these parts of the world, but it is very interesting to see what's happening in India. It is very, so is there life outside of Silicon Valley? Yes, not only in Europe. There's life outside of Silicon Valley in South Africa, in Argentina, in Brazil. I was in Mexico this week, Silicon Valley, in India, in China, in many other countries, in Turkey. So, conclusion, there's a lot of life outside of Silicon Valley. And now, if you'd like some questions, I'll be happy to answer.